The rumble of distant explosions shook the remnants of New York City. The skyline, once a monument to human ambition, was now a jagged silhouette against the darkening sky, its towers reduced to twisted skeletons. The air smelled of burning metal and scorched earth. Earth was on the verge of total annihilation, and every moment brought them closer to the inevitable. But amidst the ruins, there were still survivors. Captain Sarah Harper stood at the edge of a shattered building, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The Phoenix Division, humanity's last hope, was preparing for one final mission. If they failed, Earth would fall. There would be no more fighting, no more hopes. It would be the end of everything. "Captain, all units are ready," came a voice over her comms. Sergeant Lila Quinn, her most trusted officer, had always been the one to keep the team grounded. Today, though, even she sounded uncertain. Sarah took a deep breath, pushing the weight of her thoughts aside. "Acknowledged. We move in 5. As she surveyed the remains of the city, Sarah's mind replayed the last 2 decades of war. The coalition of alien species had come to Earth with a simple message: surrender or face extinction. The first few months had been a struggle, humanity fighting tooth and nail to preserve their home. But the aliens were relentless. They had technology beyond anything humanity could comprehend, overwhelming numbers, and no mercy. The cities fell. The armies crumbled. Earth became a war zone. But humans had always been fighters. Even when the odds were stacked against them, they never gave up. And neither would Sarah. The mission she was about to lead was humanity's last shot. Intelligence reports had confirmed the existence of a powerful weapon hidden deep beneath the ruins of a long-forgotten city in the heart of Africa. A weapon capable of shifting the balance of power. It was their one hope, and if they didn't secure it, humanity would be wiped out. She turned to her team, a group of men and women who had been through hell and back. Each one was more than just a soldier. They were the last of humanity's fighting spirit. They were the Phoenix Division. "Listen up," Sarah said, her voice cold and commanding. "We're going in to secure the weapon. We move fast, and we move together. If we don't succeed, we die here. No pressure." She allowed herself a small, bitter smile, knowing it would lighten the mood, if only slightly. The team gave a quiet chuckle, the kind of humor that only those who had seen death up close could understand. It was an unspoken bond they shared, one forged in fire. "Let's do this, Captain," Quinn said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed a hint of fear. She'd been with Sarah from the very beginning. Quinn had seen countless soldiers come and go, but it was Sarah who kept them grounded, kept them going when there was no reason to. The team loaded up their weapons, checked their gear, and prepared for the mission. The world outside had become a desolate wasteland, with the remnants of Earth's once thriving cities crumbling beneath alien occupation. The sky, perpetually filled with smoke and ash, was a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. As they moved out, Sarah led the charge, her boots crunching on the broken streets. The Phoenix Division followed in formation, their weapons raised and their eyes scanning every corner. It was a silent march, but one that spoke volumes about their resolve. These were soldiers who had long ago made peace with the fact that they might never see tomorrow. "Captain, incoming!" shouted Lieutenant Marcus, his voice snapping Sarah out of her thoughts. She turned to see a massive alien warship descending from the sky, its engines roaring as it hovered above the ground. The sheer size of it was enough to send a chill down her spine. The aliens had always had the upper hand, but this time, it was different. This time, they were fighting for something more than just survival. "Take cover!" Sarah shouted, diving behind a ruined vehicle. The rest of the team followed suit, seeking whatever shelter they could find. The first blast hit the ground just yards away, sending debris flying in every direction. The ground shook violently as the warship released another round of devastating fire. Sarah gritted her teeth, her hands tightening around her rifle. They couldn't afford to be caught in the open. "Quinn, cover the left flank." "Marcus, with me," she ordered. There was no time to hesitate. The Phoenix Division moved in unison, their years of training kicking in. They'd been in worse situations than this, and they knew what had to be done. As they advanced, Sarah's eyes narrowed. The aliens had landed, their soldiers emerging from the belly of the ship. They were huge, armored figures, towering over her team. Their weapons hummed with lethal energy. But it didn't matter. The humans had something the aliens didn't: sheer determination. Sarah's team opened fire, a hail of bullets and explosives lighting up the night. The air crackled with tension as the two sides clashed. Alien forces were relentless, but the humans were like a storm, hitting fast, hitting hard, and never stopping. "Captain, they're coming from the right!" Marcus shouted, his voice strained as he unloaded round after round into the approaching alien soldiers. "I see them," Sarah replied, her voice a growl. "Quinn, move to the right. We need to push them back." The Phoenix Division fought with everything they had. There was no fear, only focus. The alien soldiers were well trained, but they lacked the raw aggression that humans possessed. They didn't know what it meant to fight for survival, not like the humans did. The battle raged on, but Sarah's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't afford to get lost in the fight. They had a mission. They had to secure that weapon. Minutes passed like hours, but eventually, the alien forces began to retreat. Their superior numbers and technology weren't enough to stop the relentless force of humanity's will. Sarah stood tall, her breath heavy, but her eyes blazing with determination. "We're not done yet," she muttered to herself. The mission was still ahead, and there was no time to waste. The Phoenix Division gathered, regrouping in the shattered remains of what was once a bustling street. Sarah looked around at her team. They had made it through the first wave, but there was no telling what would come next. "Move out," she said, her voice steady. "We're going to find that weapon. And we're going to win this war." Her team nodded, knowing that failure was not an option. They were humanity's last hope, and Sarah would lead them to victory, or death. The journey to the uncharted planet was anything but easy. The Phoenix Division had been on the move for over a week, leaving the battered remains of New York behind and venturing into the unknown. The war had taken its toll on everyone, but there was no time for rest, no time for reflection. The only thing that mattered now was reaching the weapon before the alien forces did. Failure wasn't an option. Not after all they had sacrificed. Captain Sarah Harper sat in the cockpit of the transport, her eyes fixed on the map projected on the dashboard. The planet they were heading to was located deep in a sector no one had dared explore for centuries. It was marked as a dead zone, a region of space that even the Galactic Council had long abandoned. Yet the intel Sarah had received from the remnants of Earth's military suggested that this forgotten planet harbored a weapon that could shift the balance of the war. But as they approached the coordinates, an unsettling feeling gnawed at Sarah's gut. She trusted her team. She trusted them with her life. But there were too many secrets, too many unknowns. The mission had been classified at the highest levels. Even her most trusted officers had little to go on, and there was something about the mission's sudden urgency that didn't sit right with her. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates." Sergeant Quinn's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are we ready to land?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her eyes narrowed, and her fingers gripped the controls a little tighter. It had been days since they had received confirmation that the weapon was here, but they still had no idea what it truly was. She needed to know that her team would follow her no matter what, but lately, there had been an undercurrent of tension among them. "Let's land and see what we're dealing with," Sarah said finally, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. As the ship descended into the atmosphere, Sarah glanced back at her team. Quinn, Marcus, and the others were all seated, their faces a mixture of determination and fatigue. They had been through hell, but they had kept pushing forward. They had lost friends, lost entire battalions, yet they still fought on. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air was thick with the scent of ozone as they touched down, the ship's engines humming softly as they powered down. The landscape outside was barren, an endless expanse of cracked earth and jagged rock. It looked like a place long forgotten by the universe. The silence was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos of Earth's war-torn cities. "Welcome to paradise," Marcus muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon. Hope the weapon's worth the trip. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she stood up and signaled for the team to gear up. They had a job to do, and she wasn't about to let anything distract her. They disembarked, weapons ready, as they moved cautiously through the desolate landscape. The planet felt like it was holding its breath, as if the land itself was waiting for something to happen. Sarah kept her senses sharp, but it wasn't the emptiness of the planet that worried her. It was the sense of being watched. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like there were eyes on them, even though the planet seemed completely lifeless. As they moved deeper into the barren terrain, Marcus fell back to walk beside Sarah. His expression was unreadable, but she could sense his unease. He had been quieter than usual, and it bothered her. "Captain, there's something I need to tell you," Marcus said, his voice low. "Something I should have told you a while ago." Sarah glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "What is it?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I was part of the initial negotiations with the alien forces. Before the war started. Sarah stopped in her tracks, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. "What the hell are you talking about?" Marcus raised his hands in surrender. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could help. The aliens, they promised a way to save humanity. But it was all a lie. I was a fool, and I've regretted it ever since." Sarah's heart raced as the weight of his words sank in. Marcus, the man who had fought beside her in countless battles, had once worked with the very forces they were fighting against. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Sarah's voice was a cold whisper, but her anger was clear. "I wanted to," Marcus said, his eyes downcast. "But when the war started, everything changed. I knew I'd be seen as a traitor. I couldn't risk it. I had to prove myself to you, to the team." Sarah stared at him, struggling to process what he had just revealed. Could she trust him now? Had he truly turned his back on the alien coalition, or was he still playing both sides? Before she could respond, a sharp crackle came through her earpiece, cutting through the tense silence. "Captain, we've found something!" Quinn's voice rang out, strained. "You need to see this." Sarah snapped back into action, her mind racing as she motioned for Marcus to follow her. The team had gathered at the entrance of a massive cavern, the walls of which seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The air was thick with a hum that made her skin crawl. "Stay alert," Sarah commanded, her voice tight as she led the way into the darkness. Inside, the cavern was vast, the walls lined with strange symbols and ancient technology that seemed to glow faintly. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. In the center of the cavern stood a pedestal, and atop it, encased in what appeared to be a transparent shield, was the weapon. But as Sarah approached, something wasn't right. The air seemed to shift, the temperature dropping suddenly. And then, the words that had been hanging in the back of her mind came rushing forward. "Welcome, Captain Harper!" A voice echoed through the cavern, sending chills down her spine. Sarah's hand shot to her weapon, but before she could draw it, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was tall, its features obscured by a flowing cloak. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The figure's head tilted slightly, a cruel smile crossing its lips. "I've been waiting for you, Captain. The weapon you seek is not what you think." A realization struck Sarah like a thunderclap. The mission wasn't what it seemed. There were no secrets here. Only more lies. The cavern pulsed with a low, vibrating hum. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes locked on the figure that had appeared from the shadows. The voice that echoed through the chamber sent a shiver down her spine, but it wasn't just the tone that unsettled her. It was the familiarity in the words, the feeling that she had been led here for something much worse than a simple weapon. The figure stepped forward, its cloak flowing like smoke, and Sarah instinctively tightened her grip on her rifle. Every nerve in her body screamed that this was no ordinary enemy. This was something far more dangerous. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. "And where is the weapon?" The figure gave a slight tilt of its head, as if amused by her question. The weapon you seek is not what you believe it to be. You've come here thinking you are saving humanity, but in truth, you are on the brink of sealing its doom. Sarah's heart raced, her mind processing the implications. What are you talking about? She demanded. She motioned for her team to stay back, her eyes never leaving the cloaked figure. The weapon is a tool of ultimate control. The figure continued, its voice smooth and cold. It has the power to destroy, to create, and to reshape civilizations. But it is not a weapon of war, it is a weapon of the mind. And it will bend you to its will. The same will you think you are wielding. Sarah's brow furrowed as she stepped forward, her mind reeling. If you're trying to scare me, it's not going to work. The figure's smile remained hidden beneath its cloak, but Sarah could feel its mocking presence. I don't need to scare you, Captain. I simply need to show you the truth. With a slow, deliberate movement, it raised a gloved hand towards a pedestal in the center of the cavern. The shield around the weapon began to shimmer, its energy field flickering. The object beneath it was barely visible, but there was something about it that felt wrong. Sarah's instincts screamed that this wasn't the weapon they had come for. Without warning, the figure extended its hand fully, and the energy field collapsed in on itself, vanishing with a snap. The weapon was now fully revealed. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple device, no larger than a human skull, its surface smooth and metallic, reflecting the dim light of the cavern. But as Sarah gazed upon it, her heart dropped. The object was not a weapon at all. It was a neural interface, a device capable of controlling the minds of entire populations. This? Sarah's voice faltered. This is what we've been fighting for. The figure nodded, its cloak moving as if there were no wind. This is what you thought was your salvation. The power to destroy your enemies, to manipulate the galaxy, to create an empire. But what you will not understand is that it is never truly in your control. It is the ultimate deception. Sarah felt her blood run cold. You're lying, she said, her voice hoarse with disbelief. We've seen the intel. It's supposed to be a weapon, something capable of leveling the playing field. This can't be what you... Do you really think the aliens would give you such power without a price? The figure interrupted, its voice dark and resonant, like the whispers of ancient gods. You think the war was about survival? About fighting for Earth? No. It was a test. A test to see if humanity would be weak enough to use this. To succumb to its will. Sarah took a step back, her mind spinning. We didn't come all this way for a mind-controlled device. She muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Her mind raced through the possibilities, but there was no denying the truth in the figure's words. The device in front of her wasn't a weapon, it was a chain. Quinn stepped forward, her face twisted in anger. How do we stop it? She demanded, her voice sharp. We came for a weapon to save humanity, not enslave it. The figure's eyes glinted beneath its hood, and it seemed to smile once more. You cannot stop it, Sergeant. It has already begun. The moment you activated its core, the process began. It is not simply a weapon, it is a virus, a corruption of your own minds, of your own nature. A wave of unease washed over Sarah. She realized what the figure meant. The device wasn't just a tool of destruction. It was a tool that would warp human minds, bending them to its will until nothing of humanity remained but a puppet. The war, the struggle to survive, it had all been a trap. They weren't fighting for freedom. They were fighting for a lie. You're lying, Sarah said again, but it was less confident now. Her voice cracked, the words coming out more as a question than a statement. The weight of what was happening was pressing down on her chest. She turned to Marcus, her trusted second in command, hoping for some kind of reassurance. Marcus met her gaze, his face grim. I think it's telling the truth, Captain. He paused, his expression distant. This is bigger than us. Bigger than the war. We've been pawns in a game we didn't even know we were playing. The figure let out a low chuckle, its cloak swishing as it moved closer to Sarah. You can't fight destiny, Captain. This device has been in your hands for longer than you realize. The moment you entered this cavern, it was already too late. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She felt the ground beneath her feet shift, the air growing heavier, and the realization sank in with brutal clarity. The humans, her team, had been manipulated into coming here, into seeking out the very thing that would doom them. The aliens hadn't destroyed humanity, they had simply given humanity the means to destroy itself. No, she whispered, shaking her head. There has to be a way out of this. The figure nodded, the weight of its eyes seemingly cutting through her soul. There is a way out, Captain. But it requires something humanity has never been willing to do: sacrifice. The weapon you came for will destroy your enemies, but only if you are willing to give up everything you know. Your freedom, your choices, your humanity. Sarah's mind raced. I don't understand. The figure's laugh echoed through the cavern, full of finality. You will. Soon enough. The team stood in silence, the full weight of the situation sinking in. The battle wasn't won. It had only just begun, and the consequences of their choices would be felt for generations to come. The weight of the figure's words lingered like a storm cloud over Sarah's mind. She could feel the cold pressure of reality settling in. The weapon they had fought for wasn't a tool of salvation, but one of damnation. She had to act. There was no more room for doubt, no more room for mistakes. Sarah glanced at her team, their faces reflecting a mixture of disbelief and determination. Quinn's jaw was clenched, her eyes hard, as if she was ready to make her own decisions, regardless of the mission. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, stood still, his brow furrowed, calculating his next move. Even in the face of impending disaster, his resolve was clear. We can't let this happen, Sarah said, her voice hoarse but steady. She turned to face the glowing pedestal that held the device. We're not walking out of here with it. Not if it means what we think it does. Quinn nodded, her fingers tightening around her rifle. What's the plan, Captain? We can't just leave. This could be the only weapon that can give us a fighting chance. Marcus, whose silence had been deafening up to this point, finally spoke. The weapon is already in our hands, Captain. It's not about keeping it. It's about making sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. We need to destroy it, before it destroys us. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she studied the device, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She wasn't ready to give up just yet, not when they were so close to the one thing that could turn the war around. But Marcus was right. They couldn't risk the weapon's power. It was too dangerous. She had to think. Quinn, secure the perimeter, Sarah ordered. Marcus, we need to find a way to disable it. Fast. Quinn moved toward the entrance of the cavern, her weapon raised and her eyes scanning every corner. Sarah had always trusted her instincts, but today, those instincts were clouded by uncertainty. There was something deeply unsettling about the silence of this place, something that felt like they were being watched by unseen eyes. Marcus stepped forward, kneeling beside the pedestal and studying the device. His brow furrowed in concentration. The interface looks like it's drawing power from the planet's core, he said, tapping at the surface of the pedestal. There's no way we can just turn it off. It's integrated into the planet itself. So we're stuck with it, Sarah muttered. She clenched her fists. There had to be a way out of this. I didn't say that, Marcus replied. There's a fail-safe, but it's going to take time to trigger. We need to cut off the connection to the core before it's too late. If we do that, the device will implode. Implode? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. You're talking about destroying the only thing that can win the war? Exactly, Marcus said without hesitation. The weapon was never meant to be used by humanity. It was meant to control us, to make us something else. The aliens knew that. That's why they wanted us to find it. This isn't victory, it's slavery. We're better off without it. Sarah swallowed hard, the truth hitting her like a sledgehammer. The weapon was never a way to win the war. It was a way to manipulate them, to destroy everything that made them human. If they activated it, it wouldn't be humanity fighting back. It would be humanity being controlled by something far worse than the alien invaders. The reality of the decision before her was suffocating. She was asking her team to sacrifice everything. But it was the only choice. The only way forward. Do it, Sarah said, her voice quiet but resolute. Marcus, disable it. Now. Marcus didn't waste time with words. He moved quickly, his hands working over the pedestal, accessing the deep layers of code hidden beneath its surface. His fingers danced across the controls, his brow furrowing in concentration as he hacked into the system. For a moment, all Sarah could do was watch. Her heart pounded in her chest, the tension thick in the air. Quinn stood watch, her eyes darting back and forth, her every muscle primed for action. Sarah could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on her. The sound of Marcus's fingers tapping on the console echoed through the cavern. His voice was low, almost inaudible. Almost there. I need 5 more minutes. 5 minutes? Sarah shot him a look. We don't have 5 minutes. I know, Marcus replied, his voice tight. I'm doing what I can. But this thing, it's designed to prevent exactly what we're trying to do. The cavern seemed to close in on them as Sarah took a deep breath. She felt the weight of her team's lives on her shoulders. If they didn't get out of here soon, it would all be over. Keep moving, she ordered Quinn, who nodded and began circling the perimeter again. Sarah turned to Marcus, her voice sharp. You've got 3 minutes, Marcus. I don't care what you have to do, just make it happen. Marcus didn't respond, his attention fully consumed by the task in front of him. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he manipulated the controls, his movements quick and precise. The seconds dragged on, each one stretching longer than the last. Come on, Sarah muttered under her breath. Her eyes flickered toward the pedestal. The weapon hummed, its surface glowing faintly with power. She could almost feel it, its influence, its pull. It was calling to them, beckoning them to use it. And it was all Sarah could do to fight the urge to reach out and seize it. But she wouldn't. She couldn't. Done, Marcus finally said, his voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. The connection's severed. It's going to implode in 10 minutes. Sarah exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since they'd entered the cavern. Good. Let's get the hell out of here. The team quickly gathered, making their way back toward the exit. But just as they turned to leave, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The walls of the cavern shifted, cracks spreading through the stone as the planet's core reacted to the severed connection. Move now! Sarah shouted. Her heart raced as she sprinted toward the exit, the entire cavern shaking with an intensity she had never experienced before. The tremors grew stronger, the walls cracking, and rocks began to fall around them. The weapon was dying, but the cost of its destruction was ripping the planet apart. Go, go, go! Sarah yelled, pushing her team forward. The weight of the decision was still heavy in her chest, but there was no time to second-guess herself now. They had made the choice. They had chosen humanity's survival over the temptation of power. As they neared the exit, the final explosion erupted behind them, a massive shockwave that threw them off their feet. The force of it propelled them forward, but Sarah caught herself on a jagged rock, struggling to keep her balance. Keep moving! She shouted again, her voice cutting through the chaos. They couldn't stop now. They couldn't let the mission end in failure. They had to make it out. They had to live. And as they ran, Sarah allowed herself one final thought: humanity would survive. It would survive because they had chosen to fight with their hearts, not their minds. And that, in the end, was the greatest weapon they had. The ground beneath Sarah's feet was unsteady, as though the planet itself had been shaken to its core. The shockwave from the explosion had thrown the team forward, scattering them in every direction. Dust and debris swirled in the air, choking the atmosphere. The cavern's collapse was imminent, the once vibrant core of the planet now a ticking time bomb. They had severed the weapon's connection, but at what cost? Move! Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scrambled to her feet, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They had destroyed the weapon, but they had also triggered the destruction of the very planet that housed it. There was no time to think, no time to mourn. Survival was the only thing that mattered now. "Captain?" Quinn's voice called from the dust, sharp and urgent. "We've got to go. Now!" Sarah whipped around, her gaze locking onto Quinn's position. The sergeant was already on her feet, scanning the environment with a look of determination. The rest of the team was scattered, but they were all moving quickly. Even Marcus, who had been pale and sweat-slicked from hacking the weapons systems, was pushing forward, his eyes focused ahead. The planet was dying. The weapon had been more than just a tool, it had been the keystone holding the planet's fragile stability together. With the device disabled, the energy pulses that had sustained the planet's core had spiraled out of control. The cavern's tremors were just the beginning. Sarah's breath caught as the cavern walls cracked above them, the sound of rock and stone splitting filling the air. Time was running out. They had minutes at most before the whole planet would implode. "We've got a straight shot to the ship," Marcus called, his voice cutting through the dust. "We need to move fast." Sarah didn't hesitate. The decision had been made. They had come here to destroy the weapon, to deny the aliens their victory, and in doing so, they had set humanity on a path to freedom. The price was steep, but it had to be paid. There was no turning back now. Only forward. "Form up, people!" Sarah barked. She was already moving, her boots kicking up dust as she sprinted toward the exit. Her team followed without hesitation, each step pounding against the crumbling earth beneath their feet. The once silent planet had come alive with the fury of its collapsing core. The walls of the cavern groaned in protest, rocks crashing down around them. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and sulfur, the heat of the planet's final moments, making it harder to breathe. Yet, despite the chaos, Sarah felt a strange sense of clarity. They had done it. They had fought for survival, and they had won. "Go! Keep moving!" Sarah shouted again, her voice a mix of urgency and determination. The team pushed forward, their movements frantic but calculated. They had only one goal now: escape. They could not afford to fail. Not after everything they had been through. Not after the sacrifices they had made. Behind them, the cavern was disintegrating, the walls collapsing with terrifying speed. The path they had once taken was now an avalanche of debris, the weight of the planet's death pushing down on them from all sides. The ship was within sight. The transport that had brought them to this forsaken planet was parked just beyond the edge of the cavern. Sarah's heart beat faster as she saw the craft, its metal hull glinting through the dust. But even as they neared it, she could feel the planet's final breath, the last exhale of a dying world. "Come on, move it!" Quinn urged, pushing past Sarah to reach the ship first. Sarah's eyes flicked to Marcus, who was trailing behind. His face was tight with strain, but there was something more, something in his eyes that told her he was holding on to something. Some fear or regret that still hadn't been addressed. But there was no time for that now. As Sarah reached the ship's ramp, she could hear the grinding sound of metal as the hull buckled under the pressure of the planet's collapse. The air around them shimmered with the heat of the final explosion, the culmination of everything they had done. The planet was dying, but they were alive. They boarded the ship quickly, the engines already powering up. Quinn and Marcus helped Sarah inside, the ramp closing behind them with a sharp hiss. Sarah's eyes locked onto the control panel in front of her. She knew what had to be done. "Get us out of here!" she ordered the pilot, a young officer who had joined the crew after Earth's fall. The man nodded, his hands flying across the controls. The ship jerked as the thrusters ignited, sending them into the sky, but the planet below them was already crumbling. The surface began to crack open, fissures growing like the claws of a dying beast. The last remnants of the planet's core erupted in a blaze of light, sending a shockwave that rattled the ship. "Hold on!" the pilot shouted as he struggled to keep control. Sarah gripped the nearest railing, her teeth gritted as the ship swerved to avoid the debris raining down from the planet's disintegrating surface. The chaos outside mirrored the storm raging in her mind. They had saved humanity. But at what cost? The ship jerked again, and Sarah glanced out the viewport just in time to see the last of the planet's surface crumble into nothingness. The explosion that followed was like a star dying, a violent burst of energy that illuminated the dark expanse of space. The shockwave hit them hard, but the ship's shielding held firm. As they moved further into space, away from the destruction, Sarah exhaled slowly. Her mind raced. The images of the collapsing planet, the weapon, the chaos, they all blurred together in a rush of conflicting emotions. "We did it," Marcus said softly from beside her, his voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. He seemed to struggle with his words, as if unsure of how to feel about what they had just done. Sarah glanced at him, her gaze sharp but understanding. "Yes. We did. But there's still a long road ahead." The weight of her words settled in the room, and for a moment, the team sat in silence, each person processing what had just transpired. "Where do we go now?" Quinn asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but the exhaustion was evident in her tone. Sarah stood tall, her posture resolute. "We rebuild," she said. "Humanity survives, no matter what. And we'll fight to make sure it stays that way." They had faced the end of everything and emerged victorious. But the real battle was just beginning. Humanity had lost so much, but now they would rise again. They had been on the brink of extinction, but now they would rebuild, not just Earth, but the future of the galaxy itself. As Sarah looked out the viewport, she saw the stars beyond. There were countless worlds out there, worlds that had watched them struggle, worlds that had underestimated humanity. And now, humanity would show them what it meant to survive. To rise from the ashes and take their place among the stars. Because they were human, and no force in the universe could ever take that away.